So we are now streaming live on YouTube. So a very warm welcome to Sikkim teachers. I hope some people have also joined from Himachal, but I'm not sure. And people are still joining. So that's all right. Firstly, I want to say a few words on the topic that we are taking today. It's carbon cycle. And actually, we often imagine that it's very easy to understand. In one sense, it is and seems trivial. But carbon cycle is of very, very vital importance to our world, our living world, ecosystem. And today, excess carbon in our atmosphere is actually causing havoc on our Earth. We know that climate change is happening, or climate crisis is happening because of excessive carbon dioxide. So we must, as a like human race, we should understand what's happening and why, how we are doing it. So that's why it's important for children to really understand it properly. Second thing is, when we were doing this with children, we realized that when we were doing organic chemistry with children, they did not understand some parts of it till they understood carbon cycle. So actually, we realized that carbon cycles should a good understanding of carbon cycle or carbon should precede organic chemistry. Before we start organic chemistry, they should have basic understanding of how carbon circulates through our system. So which is what we are going to be doing today. And we have a classroom exercise also, which helps understand this very well, very clearly, and in a very simple manner. So which we'll be doing towards the end. So let me begin by sharing my screen. So so as you can see that this is being brought to you by Joy of Learning Foundation. Of course, through collaboration with the Sikkim Education Department, and then the financial assistance is being provided by Indian Oil Corporation Limited. So as usual, I'll be asking you questions which you are supposed to answer mostly on the chat box. So let's begin with the first question. So what comes to your mind when you hear the word carbon? What is it that you think of immediately? The first image. Anything this word speaks to you. I mean, anything at all. It doesn't matter. I mean, it need not be academic, technical, whatever. Anything that comes to your mind when you hear the word carbon. So I have got two answers, which are coal. Okay, very nice. Anything else? Fuel. Chemical elements. Diamond. Excellent. What else? Things that burn. Yes, absolutely. Anything else that comes to your mind? What does it look like? Okay, Munna Chetri is saying environment. Okay, great. Element with atomic number 6. All right, that's an academic definition. But anything else that comes to your mind? I mean, like, okay, when you see carbon in your surroundings, do you see it at all? And if you see, so somebody said, Durga Karki saying organic. So How about, okay, let me be more specific. Any color that comes to your mind? What color? So somebody said pollution. Radhika Sharma has said so. For me, Besnith has said charcoal. All right. So coal, charcoal, those kind of things show us the black color. Yankee is saying based on properties. Yankee, you're right. We don't always see carbon as black. Uh, Usha Sharma has raised her hand. Does she want to say something? I mean, do you want to be unmuted? I have asked you to unmute if you want to say something. But anyway, we are just entering into the discussion on carbon. We'll have a lot to discuss. But firstly, so this question when we raise, so first let's say its characteristic color, the color associated with carbon is black, and let's try finding it around us. So like somebody said charcoal, are there other places where we find the black color? In your home, where do you see? And so where friends, my internet connection is unstable. So one request is if one is unable to, I mean, if you are unable to hear or see my screen, please let me know. My colleagues also, please let me know so that I can. And actually, Geeta Satpota has said she can't hear my voice. So other people can tell me if you can hear me properly or not. Priyadashika has said soil. Yes, okay. We also see the characteristic black color in soil as well. But inside the home, there is one place. So I'll join from my mobile also in case the internet is a problem. So just a second. Let me just do that also. But please let me know if my voice is not audible properly, because internet uh, gets unstable a little. So, okay, look at this. This is a very familiar picture, particularly where coal or wood is burnt, get this characteristic black color. You see it in dhabas, roadside restaurants, tea shops, etc., etc. So where does this black color come from? Very familiar. Where does it come from? Okay, yeah. So Geeta Saputta coal, charcoal, etc. Basically, fuel is actually due to this soot is where is it coming from? I mean, in our fuels, what is there which is giving this black burning wood or whatever. So what inside wood is wood or coal or any other fuel? Who's my net became unstable again. So yeah, network is fluctuating. So maybe what I can do is I can speak from my mobile, but video can be on from the laptop. So I'll do that so that my work.
Can you hear me now? All right. So my voice is coming from my mobile phone. Manisha, can you speak? Manisha Naved, can you speak?
Video is also frozen now.
Video is frozen. Yeah. So I mean, network is fluctuating. So, but at least my mobile is on. So as long as you can hear me properly, we can still work. Maybe the PPT can be shown by Apurva or Manisha. So Apurva, you can show the PPT because my laptop, the Wi-Fi is fluctuating. It's showing me internet, but it's like still the internet is not stable. So Apurva is showing the screen. Apurva, previous slide, please. The slide where fire is giving off soot. Can everyone see Apurva's? Can you see the slides? All of you? Apurva, go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so so we can see this is a sooty flame, which means the flame is giving off carbon particles. The soot, what we call as soot or kajal or KOHL, kohal, there are many names given to this. In Hindi, we call it kajal, and at times, traditionally, it's used to put in children's eyes also. So the question is, I mean, carbon should have burnt in air with oxygen and should have given carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a colorless gas. It doesn't look like this black smoke. So the question is, why is carbon remaining after burning? After burning, we shouldn't be able to see this black color of carbon. So why are you seeing it? So you can answer on chat, please. So Pami Basnet says it's incomplete. So like 3 people have said that it's unburned carbon particles in complete burning or incomplete combustion. Correct. Excellent. So basically it is carbon which is remaining. I mean, all of the carbon could not get, or all of the fuel could not get oxygen, sufficient oxygen to burn. And therefore, this is what happened. Some carbon remained unburned, and we are getting its black color in the flame. So, Apurva, next slide. So look at this. I mean, this is a very common observation around us. You see, you take a white paper and you burn it. And on the margins, you will immediately see a black color. So in ordinary life, we'll say this is like charred paper, burnt paper. Similarly for cloth, you take a white cloth and as you burn it, starts getting totally black. So before turning into ash, first it will turn totally black. So the surprising thing is, inside that white paper or inside that black cloth, we have so much carbon. And we see that characteristic black color, though we don't associate it with carbon, because in our ordinary life, we don't think of things around us, a whole lot of things around us being made of carbon. That's not how we are not used to thinking like that, right? Next, please. So here's something which is called as sugar charcoal. Apurva will run this video. This is basically sugar in which concentrated sulfuric acid has been put. And let's see what happens. Apurva, it's not proceeding further.
No, it is proceeding. It was playing only. Oh, actually, I think, are you able to hear it?
No. Firstly, sound is not there, but the video stopped as of now. So just run it again. I mean, like further. So friends, this was sugar. And in sugar, concentrated H2SO4 was put in, which actually sucks away all water. Geeta Sapkota is saying my voice is not clear. Is that true for everyone?
No, now it's very clear. You're quite audible.
Manisha, can you give suggestion to Geeta ma'am? What she can do? So friends, on the screen, you can see that sulfuric acid, since it's such a good water sucker, it has sucked away all the H2O part from sugar. I mean, wherever there's hydrogen and oxygen, it has sucked away all the water, and only thing remaining is pure carbon. So look, so much carbon is coming out of sugar crystals. Who imagines that white, transparent sugar crystals have so much of black carbon inside? You can even see steam coming out. And here's the equation shown on screen. So basically we get carbon plus water. I mean, sugar is basically hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. So this is a very interesting reaction to do, but of course one has to be very careful with the concentrated sulfuric acid, but it's a beautiful lab experiment. So next slide, please, Apurva. So this is, as you can see, it's called sugar charcoal. And I mean, you turn sugar into actual charcoal. Similarly, bones are turned into charcoal. So many things around us can be turned into charcoal. Wood, we know, is always turned into charcoal. And we are showing you here that to turn a wood into charcoal, which means like wood has carbon, but it has a lot of other substances too. So it is heated up anaerobically. It's heated up in such a way so that it doesn't get any air. If it got air, it would burn away. But if it doesn't get air, then a lot of volatile other substances actually evaporate, and we are left with a lot of carbon, which we call as wood charcoal. We also use it in our homes or otherwise. So, I mean, this is like, since it's a purer form of carbon, it has much more carbon, it burns well. So you see, out of like sugar and paper and cloth and wood, we can extract carbon. So like, it's very visible that in our surroundings, a lot of things have carbon. So can you pick out carbon containing substances from the following? I mean, on the screen, you can see many names. So actually, I would request you to pick out only those things which do not contain carbon. Just write the names of those things out of these which you think don't contain carbon. So please write on the chat box. And this exercise is pretty hard for children. Some of you may find it easy, or some may be a bit confused about a few items, but for children, it's pretty hard. So what do you think does not contain carbon? Please write those things in the chat box. So Radhika Sharma has said copper, nylon, and sand. What do other people say? Sanjit Kumar has said copper and sand. Others? One response is sand. So copper, sand are two answers. Any other answer? Sheetal Pradhan says nylon. Any other answer here? You could be missing out on one thing here. Salt here is the ordinary common salt. Yes, so Pami Basnit has said salt. Common salt is sodium chloride, it doesn't have carbon. So now how many people say that nylon doesn't have carbon? Like, 2 people have already said that nylon doesn't have carbon. Do other people agree with that? So Priyadarshika Subba is saying it has carbon. See friends, if plastic has carbon, plastic is a polymer. We'll come to what a polymer is. So plastic and nylon have similar origins. Both are like we are made from petroleum, and which is basically a mixture of carbon containing compound. We'll come to that. But like other than sand and copper and salt, everything else would have carbon. And like I said, children find this exercise pretty hard and not surprising, because in our daily life, when we don't think of oil as containing carbon, or for that matter, orange as containing carbon, milk as containing, milk looks white. So who will think milk has carbon, and so on. So Apurva, next. So how do we get to know that things contain carbon? So how do we decide? Because obviously we can't see carbon. I mean, nobody can see carbon inside sugar or wood or plastic, etc., or milk. So how do we know things contain carbon? How do you think we will get to know? How do we decide? What is the test? One is, of course, your knowledge of chemistry will tell you, but other than that, if you have to judge if something is containing carbon or not, how will you judge? Excellent. Radhika Sharma has said, all living things contain carbon. So that's where we get our biggest clue. Apurva, next, please. Next statement, click. So we can make an inference about their source. Where is it coming from? So all living things. Tenchu has said releasing of smoke while burning. Yeah, but suppose you don't burn it. Suppose you can't burn it. How will you decide? You will think about this ultimate source. If the source, so Geeta Sapkota has said carbon is the major component of many compounds, but which compounds? Question is which compounds? How do we decide? So the answer has been given by Radhika already, that if the source is some living source coming from the living world, then it's most likely a carbon compound. There is a very, very, very tiny fraction coming from the living world. For example, water. If the water is coming from living world, it won't have carbon. But Santosh Besnit has said, which decay, that is also correct. Living things decay, but then non-living things can also decay, right? I mean, think of metals. I mean, we won't call it decaying, I mean, anything which would combine with oxygen in air or surrounding things, we will say decays. So then in that case, it may not have carbon, but it is basically compounds obtained from living things. So next, please. If the source is living beings, just a sec, if the source is living beings in any manner, then it will be a carbon compound. Next. So we will just do this. For all the objects, I mean, for many objects around us, we will first write the object, the material it is made of, and what is the source of that material. So an exercise like that is given on the next slide. So next, please. So you have to fill this up for yourself. We will show the filled one later, but you have to fill up first. So what is the material? These items on the left-hand side, what material they are made up of, and what is the source? Where did that material come from? So think of each of these. So can you tell about one or two items, what you have written? And you have to show that the source is either living or non-living. So can you talk about, let's say, plastic? What about brick or iron? So Geeta Sapkota has said plastic comes from cellulose, which comes from plants. These days, we have started making some plastics from cellulose from plants, but normally plastic is all from petroleum. So if we say the material is petroleum, then the source of petroleum is actually living beings which were living on this earth millions of years back. Radhika Sharma has said polymer, dead animals. Radhika, which which item you are talking about? Are you talking about plastic? Yeah, looks like Radhika is talking about plastic. So yes, so plastic comes from polymers which come from dead animals in the form of petroleum. Actually, dead animals create petroleum. So Ruth Pradhan has said clothes, which come from cotton, which comes from plants. Excellent. So Yankee said obtained from fossil fuel. Yes, absolutely. And fossil fuels come from living beings. So that's the point. The fossil fuels, all fossil fuels come from living beings. So Geeta has said book, paper, plants. Yes, very good. So how about, let's say, brick or water? Book comes from paper, which comes from living beings. Yes, plants. Absolutely correct. How about brick? What will you say of brick? Brick is made out of which material? Mud, soil. And what is the source of soil? I mean, what would you say? Brick is made out of mud and soil. So, I mean, source of soil is, ultimate source of soil is rocks. Radhika Sharma has said rocks. Yes, so we can say it's a non-living source, and that's why brick would not contain carbon. So iron nail comes from iron, which is a metal which comes from, again, from rocks. So like Ruth Pradhan has said, so this is the source is rocks. Leather comes from animals which are living. Yes, excellent. So Apurva, you can go to the next slide, please.
Should I go on from this one also?
Yeah, show the next one. Next one is filled up, actually.
Yeah, this is filled up. So.
Oh, but it hasn't changed. The screen hasn't changed.
Oh. Wait, let me check on my phone. I have changed here.
Now it has loaded. So people, we have actually put the three things which are not from living sources, we have put them in blue, and others we have put them in purple. So the four things which are actually, there's glass also, which was not there in the other table. There's rubber band also. So you can see that this exercise is very fruitful for children, because if you push them to think where something comes from, that eventually you will see either it comes from fossil fuels or from rocks or living beings. So that decides the origin of those substances. And once you know the origin, then you can decide whether it is a living being or whether it's a carbon compound or not, non-carbon compound. whether it's a carbon containing thing or not. That's why this exercise is a very good background for organic chemistry. I mean, if you teach children organic chemistry without building this background, they don't understand. They have big gaps in their thinking. So this is very important for getting into organic chemistry. Next, please. So, see, we will not go into details of what chemical bonds are, or how carbon is, or hydrogen is, or carbon compounds. We only are, so organic chemistry requires full-fledged sessions by itself, which we'll hold sometime. But today we will only say that carbon actually combines very well with 4 hydrogens. So like we see here, we see a methane molecule. So carbon and hydrogen combine very quickly, very readily, and very strongly. So since carbon and hydrogen combine so easily, both are small atoms, and they make very strong, they are very strongly attracted to each other and make very stable compounds. So we have a lot of carbon and hydrogen compounds in our world, which we call as hydrocarbons. So next. So as we know, but this could be news for children, that carbon can also join with itself. So instead of 1 carbon, now it's 2 carbons. So carbon has 4 bonds to make. So 3 bonds are made with hydrogen, 1 with another carbon. This is also possible. So therefore, carbon chains are possible, and carbon, as we know, can make endless chains, large, big chains of various kinds. There are pure hydrocarbons, which means only carbon and hydrogen, but there are endless other chains which have carbon and hydrogen, but some other substances also. And even carbon and hydrogen chains are made in various fashions. I mean, here, all hydrocarbons are shown, which are plastic, motor oil, diesel, gasoline. And these are very, very long carbon chains. They can be having hundreds or thousands of carbon atoms linked together as big, huge chains. Next, please. And they can also be branching chains. So they need not be straight. They can be branching chains. So complicated structures further. And they are three-dimensional. It's not like, if you see them on a flat paper, it may look as if they are flat, but they are not flat. They are three-dimensional structures, complicated structures. And the important thing we must realize is that living beings are primarily made of carbon chains. If carbon chains did not exist, we wouldn't exist. Though, of course, our bodies have a lot of other substances and molecules, but the primary substance, the primary material of our bodies, of all living beings, is actually carbon chain, small or big, often very, very big. But basically, we are products of carbon chains. So now coming to carbohydrates. So if we think about food, Apurva, can you go back? So friends, think of our major food substances. What are the major food substances? Major substances we get from our food. One was like glucose, we saw. Glucose, or call it carbohydrates. What else? Our food. Major substances in our food. Proteins, fats, vitamins, etc. Excellent. So interesting thing is, see, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, these are in big quantities. Vitamin, mineral are very small, minor quantities. So yes, excellent. So proteins, fats, carbohydrates are the 3 major chunks which make up our food. Apurva, please disable annotation. So we will look at each of them. Proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Minerals and vitamins could be other molecules, but let's look at first carbohydrates. And here we are showing you a glucose molecule. See, showing this to children who have not studied organic chemistry still is useful. We think it's very useful because children have some idea when we are saying glucose or when we are saying carbohydrates, what do we mean? Even if they don't know much chemistry, because very clearly, when you look at the glucose molecule, you can see 6 carbons here. The blue dots are carbons, and there's another carbon up there. So glucose molecule is this hexagonal structure, and a lot of glucose molecules on the right hand side shown as like linked together make starches. So a lot of glucose molecules chained together make starch, which is like rice and potato and all that. So basically, glucose is all carbon chains. Glucose and things made out of glucose, which is starch and other carbohydrates, they're all carbon chains. So we'll go to the next slide. Similarly for fats. So, I mean, one kind of fat we come across is triglycerides. So triglycerides are triple carbon chains. Here, these black dots are carbons. And here, one type of triglyceride is shown where 3 chains are linked together by one glycerol. So the yellow thing is glycerol, which is our ordinary glycerin, and 3 carbon chains. There can be, of course, multiple kinds of triglycerides or other fats. So this is one fat shown, again showing the point we are trying to make is that fats are also carbon chains. Fats are nothing but various types of carbon chains. So here, again, we come across carbon chains. Now getting to the next one, protein units. So protein is made out of a lot of small units, which we call as amino acids. And we know that in our body, there are 20 essential amino acids in our bodies, but different living things can have different, some different amino acids. So here you see one amino acid, glycine, shown through a simple structure, but its 3D structure is also shown on screen. But see the black dots. The black dots are carbons, and the 2 black dots are carbons. And of course, like there is hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen shown as blue here. But the important, so proteins have necessarily nitrogen also. But important thing is protein units, these amino acid units are themselves carbon, made out of carbon. And when these amino acid units link up with each other and make chains, we get proteins. So next slide. So here there are different types of amino acids shown with different colors. And when they make a thread like beads in a chain of beads, then, or a garland of beads, then they are called as peptides. And when this folds up into a complicated shape, we call it a protein. But essentially, what you are seeing in front of you is another type of carbon chains. Carbon here, of course, mixed. Apurva, just wait a minute. So carbon, which is mixed with hydrogen and not mixed, combined with hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, yet a carbon chain only, various types of carbon chain. So let's stop for a minute. Apurva, stop sharing and let's take questions. Is there any question or any doubt that you would want to ask at this point? Or any comment before we proceed further? If you are comfortable so far, just say yes, I can proceed. Just say yes, then if sufficient number of you say yes, then I'll go ahead. So at least a few people have said, yes, I can proceed. So I'll go on. So Apurva, you can start sharing once again. So we have seen that our food is made up of carbon chains, which our body utilizes in various ways. It breaks up the chains, makes new ones, makes appropriate ones, makes whatever it needs. But essentially, much of our body is also made out of proteins and fats and carbohydrates. The substance of our bodies, the flesh and blood and whatever we contain our body is mainly carbon chains. So going on to the next slide, we now come to the concentrated carbon sources that exist in our world, which is, as we know, our fuels. The major fuel today is fossil fuels, which is petroleum and coal. And what are the source? Animals and plants that lived millions of years ago. So basically it was living beings who had bodies made out of carbohydrates and proteins and fats. That's true of both plants and animals. Plant proteins may be different from animal proteins. Every species, every living being will have its own type of protein, but basic substances, proteins and fats and carbohydrates. So the most important materials. So therefore, millions of years back, suppose the world looked like this. This is like some painting by artists. So suppose this was what the living world looked like. And we've heard that much of the living world was under the sea. Underwater, most of life emerged under the sea. Still much of life lives under the sea, but earlier more so. So on the ground or in the sea, so much living matter existed in the past. Next. And this living matter or living beings include microscopic ones, which we do not see with our eyes, but they populate the world. I mean, all water bodies are full of phytoplankton and zooplankton. So tiny plants and tiny animals living inside water. So this is also living matter inside water bodies. So here's a very interesting picture. This is a modern peat bog. Peat bog is a marsh, or we call as wetlands, where there's lots and lots of water, and because of water which is still water, lot of decaying matter. So plants or trees, reeds and all that die, vegetation dies, rots here. And when it rots, when it decays, it makes this blackish substance on the surface. So this blackish substance would naturally contain a lot of carbon compounds. It will have a lot of carbon chains. And this is what is called as peat. It's brownish in color. And this is peat. So this is a peat bog, a marsh which has a lot of peat. And such peat bogs can be found today on Earth's surface. So such peat bogs must have existed millions of years ago as well, and made out of dying plant material. So next. And today, the old, millions of years old peat bogs have converted into a coal mine, where if you dig it out, you get black coal, which is highly concentrated carbon compounds, not pure carbon, but carbon compounds, but very much concentrated. So from peat to this stage, there are multiple stages in between, which you will see on the next slide. So, I mean, here it's shown that as time passes, on the left-hand side, you can see that peat has a lot of decaying vegetable matter, vegetation matter. So when this gets like pressed by rocks on top of it, I mean, when it gets buried inside the ground and a lot of pressure builds up on top, pressure of upper layers, So a lot of pressure and heat inside the Earth's surface. So under pressure and heat, peat changes into a more compacted form called lignite, which gets further compacted with heat. So loses other substances, but much more concentrated carbon, which is like subbituminous, then bituminous coal, and there's anthracite. So all these stages are actually found on Earth at different depths. So normally good coal mines have more of the right hand side, and poor coal mines have more of the left hand side. So I mean, people keep looking for good coal. So that good coal has much more concentrated carbon compounds, and which is the bituminous coal or anthracite. So this is what is dug out of coal mines today. And this is fossilized plants. Basically what we are seeing is fossilized plant. Similarly, like for millions and millions of, you can see the ocean, which is 50 to 100 million years ago. So which is like a time when dinosaurs also lived in between. And then there is inside the ocean, there was tiny or big, lots of living animals and plants which died and then got deposited, their dead bodies got deposited on the ocean bed, and they get embedded in sand and silt. So their remains get got into the deeper and still deeper layers, and once again subjected to intense pressure from above. Such a huge ocean above and mud layers on top. So lot of pressure and decay and chemical change ultimately turns them into oil and gas. So the smaller molecules created become gas, and the bigger molecules or bigger chains become oil. So this is how petroleum was formed millions of years back. It is once again a fossil fuel which contains both plants and animal remains. So going to the next slide. The same process here is shown very roughly, that 300 million years back, we had the ocean with its plants and animals, which die and get buried under the layers of sedimentary rock. I mean, sedimentary rock is basically sediments depositing on top of each other. So by 100 million years, what had happened was that there's sand and sediment deposited on top. You can see in the center. Underneath, you have decomposing organic remains. So this is subjected to immense heat and pressure, which decompose the organic material over millions of years. And today we have the situation shown on the right. So on top, you have sand, sediment, rock, water above that. Underneath, oil and gas accumulations, which we drill through and discover viable petroleum. I mean, something which is easy to actually access and pull out. So that petroleum we take out, and we know it is concentrated in certain parts of the world, and we have a full-fledged petroleum politics in the world. In fact, petroleum wars. Oil wars, oil if you please. I mean, in ordinary talk, it's called oil and not petroleum. So next slide. So here's a very interesting photograph where Earth is cut vertically. And if you see vertically placed layers of rock, somewhere down you see black layers, blackened layers. The color is suddenly different, and which means that the blackened layers have much more carbon. I mean, whether it is like good quality or coal cannot be said like this, but it certainly has much more carbon, which means it must have remains of living beings at some depth, which is now buried underneath. So we can visually see it. Next, here's a modern oil well. Apurva, first modern oil well. Just go back a little. Yeah, after this. So here's a modern oil well. So which pulls out deeper layers of oil or petroleum, if you like. Next. This is what crude oil looks like. When you pump it out, it is thick, dark, and viscous. I mean, not like completely viscous. It's like liquid, but it's a very dark liquid, dark and thick liquid. You can see it on the next slide. That slide which shows petroleum. This one. Yeah. So actually, like about 150 to 200 years back, some petroleum bubbled up on top of the Earth's surface. So actually, you can see it bubbling on top, and somehow people discovered that this was a very good fuel. Once they discovered that this was a very good fuel, then they started firstly collecting from the surface, then digging deeper, and then slowly discovered what a valuable material this was, easy fuel. And then came someday taking out various substances from it, which today we call as fractional distillation, shown on one of the slides. Apurva, can you get to that slide? Yes. So fractional distillation is nothing. There's a very tall tower in the center. So you can see that crude oil, that thick, dark liquid, is first passed through a furnace where it's heated up at a very high temperature, and then made to rise up. This heated liquid is made to go through this tall chamber. So it itself gets deposited in various layers. So it breaks up, actually breaks up into different substances depending on their composition or their properties. So on top, of course, the gases go. Light gases go on top. So, and this is collected as petroleum gas or natural gas. Then below that, the second layer you can see, and the temperature is also shown. There's that the lighter liquid, less dense liquid called gasoline or petrol gets collected. Next to that is naphtha, and next to that is paraffin, next to that is diesel, next to that is fuel oil. Heavier and heavier layers settle down, and below that is lubricating oil, and the last layer, densest, is bitumen or tar, with which we line our roads. So fractional distillation is just breaking up coal into, Apurva, just a sec, just back, please. So it's just breaking up of petroleum into different products, which are, again, most of these substances are a combination of hydrocarbons. It's not a single substance. It's a combination of different hydrocarbons. So we will stop sharing for a minute. And if you have any comments or questions, we can take those before proceeding further. Any doubts, comments, questions? Anything that you want to say or ask? If not, then you have to tell me to proceed. You can say, yes, I can proceed. I know there is like not much interaction happening, but there is information. You would appreciate that we have tried showing what petroleum looks like, what coal looks like, how coal is formed, because again, for children, it is very hard to understand. Firstly, they've never seen petroleum. We say crude oil, we say petroleum, this, that. All these words are mixed up in their heads, one. So people are saying, yes, I can proceed. Okay, yeah, so I'll just give these comments. Firstly, children have not seen all this. Second, what does fossilization mean? When we say fossil fuel, they have no idea what we are talking about or how fossil fuels are formed. So deliberately, we have tried showing the process of coal formation and petroleum formation in some pictures so that at least they can make some sense of what we are saying. Otherwise, these words are mere words for children. They have no idea how this happens. In fact, even leave alone children, even adults don't have an idea because none of us have seen this process. I have never seen petroleum myself. So, but I can at least see a photograph. Ruth Pradhan is asking why diesel is used in heavier vehicles as petrol in other vehicles. Ruth Pradhan, I mean, as I understand, see, the question will require a more informed answer, but I will just say what I kind of guess. Firstly, diesel is cheaper. It used to be cheaper at least. Now in our country, both diesel and petrol are nearly the same rate. But diesel was far cheaper because it is a less efficient fuel. So because it's cheaper, so heavier vehicles, which you need a large amount of fuel, would use diesel for cost considerations, not for efficiency considerations, but cost considerations. For example, trucks or even heavy vehicles. So cost was the major consideration, and and you know that diesel engines are separate and petrol engines are separate. So if you try using diesel in a petrol engine, the engine will become even less efficient. I mean, an engine designed for one type of fuel will not function properly on another fuel. Suppose you want to run your car on alcohol, you will have to design a special engine for alcohol. So for every fuel, the maximum possible efficiency is achieved by the correct temperature, the correct space, or correct speed, whatever. I mean, engine design is also a very specialized field. So basically, diesel engines are special engines designed for diesel, but diesel is used because of cost considerations and not really efficiency considerations. Efficiency wise, see, a fuel is efficient because of two reasons. How much heat it gives, so its calorific value, or how much waste it generates. So the lesser waste, the better it is. So in these two considerations, petrol is better than diesel, to my understanding. If anybody knows more about it or can refine this, they can please tell. Okay, so let's proceed then, Apurva. So next. So friends, so there is another place where, so we saw that a lot of carbon from the living world goes to fossil fuels over time, over millions of years. Another exit point for carbon, or exit point, or another place where it gets deposited is through the carbon dioxide dissolved in water. Carbon dioxide is not highly soluble in water. We know that to dissolve carbon dioxide in water, like in soda water, we have to put it under pressure. Under heavy pressure, we can dissolve more carbon dioxide in water. We can make soda out of it. But the moment you open the bottle soda water, carbon dioxide bubbles up. But the little amount of carbon dioxide, which naturally dissolves in water under normal atmospheric pressure, yields to this, what you are seeing below. Carbon dioxide combines with water and makes hydrogen carbonate, H2CO3, which is a weak acid. It's a very weak acid, very mild acid. And this gives like two kinds of ions in water. One is, of course, you can see that it will have the carbonate ion. So you can see this CO3 ion with the two negative charges on it. So there is this CO3 ion, carbonate ion, but also the carbonate ion and H2CO3 also combine to give this, which is like hydrogen carbonate or bicarbonate ion, which has one negative charge. So basically, all this is showing is, I mean, you can tell this to children in class 9 and 10 when they understand ions. Otherwise, you can skip this part. But basically, carbon dioxide dissolved in water generates carbonate and bicarbonate ions in water. This is what these two equations are showing. So, so water will naturally have some carbonate and some hydrogen carbonate, bicarbonate, right? Those ions are there. And the moment, and water has, of course, rocks. I mean, seabeds and sea rocks will have a lot of calcium rocks, calcium in various forms, also dissolved calcium, dissolved calcium salts. So, Apurva, next. So when calcium combines with carbonate, it makes calcium carbonate, which is actually utilized by living organisms to make their shells or bony structures. So you can see on the left-hand side, you can see a lot of shells, and they're beautiful outer coverings, hard outer coverings. All of them are made out of calcium carbonate with some other substances. And similarly, on the right-hand side, you can see corals. So corals, the coral skeletons are also made out of calcium carbonate. So a lot of calcium carbonate exists inside the world's seas, and it has carbon trapped inside. You can see there is, in CaCO3, there is one C. So a lot of carbon goes inside here as well. Next slide. So once again, as shells, mollusks and shells die, they line the seabed, they get compacted with pressure from top. So they also go through stages of transformation to generate limestone. All the limestone in the world comes from seabeds, but now it can be above seabeds also. Which used to be old seas, now on the surface rocks, as you can see on the next slide. So here we see limestone rocks. Even marble is limestone, which is like transformed, metamorphized limestone. So marble and limestone, all of these white-looking rocks have a large amount of carbon trapped inside. And you can see this also has origin from living beings. Like living beings created their living skeletons first out of calcium carbonate. When they died, then all this got deposited as rocks. So this is another place where carbon is trapped, of course, with calcium. So with that, now we come to carbon cycle. This is shown simply here, but we will instead, Apurva, stop sharing. Instead of explaining it here, we will show it step by step through an exercise, which we recommend that you do in your classroom, which makes this very easy to understand. And it's a fun exercise to do. Apurva will be showing it on her screen. So Apurva, are you ready with your substances?
Yeah, just give me a moment and I'll switch on the camera.
Yeah. So meanwhile, friends,
you also make my other device, my phone, the host.
I will. So friends, meanwhile, if you have any question. Question, comments, or anything else? that you want to say before Apurva shows that? It's a classroom exercise. So, friends, we have many such exercises which can be done on the board, on chart papers, or even as role plays where children take different roles. But right now we can't show the role play. So we are currently showing it through black bindis. So black bindis would be representing carbon. So Apurva is showing it on a chart paper. And we will spotlight her video. So here's a chart paper on which Apurva will be using some boxes drawn with, either cut out of paper, or you can even draw with pens. But to show that carbon exists inside, we are deliberately using black bindis, simple sticker black bindis, to show where the carbon is originally, where it's going, how it's changing shape from one place to another, to another, to another, how the carbon cycle proceeds. So, Apurva, can we?
Yes, you can start. I'm ready.
Okay. So first we have a lot of carbon in air present as carbon dioxide. Apurva, is it possible to turn your device so that we see it as this comes vertical? In the sense, we are seeing it sideways. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, this way. So,
I'll have to then move it around a little bit to fit the entire cycle in it.
No. I was suggesting that you turn your device instead of the chart paper.
I didn't turn the chart paper, I turned the device.
Acha, okay. Yeah, but it will be better to...
But I can turn the chart paper as well. So it will fit in more.
See if you can do that.
Yeah. Just one moment.
And for teachers, meanwhile, it helps children extremely well if you use some concrete object for representation, particularly an object which is not visible. Think of carbon. Where is carbon visible to us in our daily lives? Or children don't see it. And we say that petroleum, coal, everything is carbon, fuels are carbon, living beings are carbon, organic compounds are made of carbon. So that's why it's very deliberate. So when she's showing CO2 in air, there are these black bindis representing carbon atoms. So carbon is not alone. It is like CO2 combined with 2 oxygens. But you can see carbon as these black bindis, right? So now you will tell me, I will keep asking questions and you will tell me. So how does this carbon dioxide get into living beings? What is the route? What is the channel? How does it get into living beings? First. Apurva, there's, I think, sound from... So...
yeah, I just moved the tables, that's why. I hope it's not a lot of disturbance. Should I mute myself?
Maybe you can. नहीं, अभी तो नहीं है, अब disturbance नहीं है, पहले थी. But the screen is shaking a little. I don't know why.
It's actually trying to refocus. I don't know how can I stop
your
it from
device
happening.
Trying. Your device camera must be doing this naturally because it's
Yes. Yeah. So it's trying to do that.
Is saying through food. Vasanthi, you are right. But think of CO2 directly entering a living being. There is only a single process where it directly enters. Where does it enter a living being? Ruth Pradhan, in breathing, CO2 doesn't enter. In breathing, oxygen enters. Right? Which is the process where carbon dioxide is taken in by a living being. Apurva, maybe you can switch off the device till we come to the next stage. Or
All
maybe. Huh. So, Priyadarshika is saying, so Ruth Pradhan has said photosynthesis. See, photosynthesis directly absorbs this CO2 in air. That's the only route through which carbon enters the living world. So plants suck in this carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. And what happens to this carbon dioxide when photosynthesis happens? Where does this carbon go? What happens to this carbon? Used to form carbohydrates, correct? We will say glucose. So glucose is generated, which we saw was a carbon chain. So this is exactly what Apurva will be showing. Yes, Apurva, now you can switch on. So Apurva is showing this carbon dioxide sucked inside plants. So some of this carbon goes into plants, and what it generates is, of course, combined with water, it makes glucose, which Apurva is showing through this red triangle, where she has put in 6 carbons just to show that glucose is a 6-sided molecule. It's a hexagon, but that's all right. I mean, right now she's using one color to show glucose, right? And so whatever carbon dioxide was absorbed by plants first gets converted into glucose and gets trapped into these molecules. And now plants, as we saw, also have fats and proteins. How does the plant get its fat? Where does the fat come from? Where does the fat come from for the plant? So Radhika Sharma is saying linked carbon chains. Yeah, so where do those carbon chains come from? Geeta is saying minerals. Any other answer? I mean, after all, minerals are not carbon. Minerals do not contain carbon. So it has to come from the original source. So, which means, see, plants, once they have made glucose, they can utilize this glucose only to manufacture, Geeta is saying humus. Humus also is actually, a mixture of various minerals out of which plants primarily take nitrogen, but yeah, other minerals. But carbon is not their target. Carbon, the source of carbon is this only. Carbon dioxide absorbed from air, out of which glucose is made. So since once they have glucose, they have inside glucose, they have carbon, they have oxygen, they have hydrogen. So you saw that fat is also made up out of C, H, and O. So the same glucose molecule can be broken and converted inside cells into fat. So the same thing is converted into fat. So plants manufacture everything. So here, the same glucose which is made first is converted into fats as per their own need and convenience. By the way, I just want to ask, where do you find fats? I mean, do you sometimes see fat in plants? If you do, where do you see it? It exists in many places, but I mean, where do we see it in plants? Do you ever see fats? Seeds, excellent. I mean, most oils we take out is from seeds. Mustard oil and sunflower oil and safflower oil and rice bran oil, and all those are taken out from seeds. So we readily see oil there, but oils exist, fats exist in other places as well. So again, manufactured originally from plants. Plants manufacture all their food. So from glucose, fats. And now where would they get proteins from? Any guesses? So Basanti is saying from nitrogen, but proteins has C, H, O, and N. MAZ is saying nitrogen cycle, but protein is not nitrogen alone. It has carbon, it has hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So where does the nitrogen come from? Firstly, so Radhika Sharma is saying combination of glucose with nitrogen. Yes, glucose will have to be broken open. So glucose molecules broken and amino acids made out of those. So plants are again manufacturing their own. Manufacturing their amino acids using nitrogen. Where is the nitrogen coming from? Soil rich in humus. Excellent. Yeah, so the only route through which plants can take nitrogen is soil which has humus or which has decaying organic matter, or we have added urea or fertilizer or compost. So nitrogen comes from there, but C, H, and O are already existing in glucose. So all four of them are utilized to make amino acids which are linked as proteins. I mean, let me try showing once again, just for memory's sake. I will show the protein and fat molecules once again on the slideshow. So we showed. So this was our glucose, which chains of glucose was starch, and then these were fats, and these were, we did not show actually, our mistake. Fats are, these are just C, H, and O chains. So just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. So glucose chains can be broken up into and made into these. And then this was protein unit. So you can say, see, there is C, O, H, and N also here. So once glucose is there, C, H, and O are available. Nitrogen has to be taken from the soil, nitrogen compounds. And then these new molecules made many kinds of amino acids which are linked together to give proteins. So plants manufacture their own proteins. So plants are generating everything from this CO2 sucked from air and nitrogen sucked from the soil. Nitrogen compounds, not directly nitrogen. We have a full nitrogen cycle, a full session on nitrogen cycle. We'll soon take it. But this is how plants have made their carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Now, where does all this go now into the living world? Who now takes it from here? Where do plants go? Or where does this carbon will go next? It has many routes, but you can mention any. What will happen to these plants? Okay, Maz has said animals, primary consumers. Yes, excellent. So animals will eat up these plants, and once they eat, all these proteins and carbs and fats will go into animal tummies. And notice that animals will not utilize them just like that. Animals will actually break them into their simplest parts. So starches will be broken into glucose, then animals will manufacture their own carbohydrates, their own proteins, their own fats as per their needs, which are different from plant proteins, different from plant fats. So that, just to show that Apurva is cutting out some pieces from here, just to show that both are not the same, right? Both are different. So this is something we should actually tell children. So animals have eaten them up, and now they are making up, all this is making up animal bodies. So our bodies, we of course utilize all this for energy as well. We consume some of it, but rest is generating our bodies. Now, how does this carbon, now, so this carbon is trapped in plant bodies, trapped in animal bodies. How does it go back to the environment? Can you name one route it goes back to the environment? Respiration. Excellent. Both plants and animals would breathe out carbon dioxide. So there is this route of respiration. So this carbon, which is trapped into the bodies, will constantly go back to air through the process of respiration. Any other way carbon would go back to the environment? From plant and animal bodies? Decomposition. So plants and animals will decay and decompose with the help of decomposers, which we talked about in the ecosystem also. So there's this other route, which we can say decomposers. So decomposers will eat up the remains. They will eat up the remains of plants and animals and release some of this carbon. Of course, some will stay in decomposers' own bodies, whether it's fungi or whether it's bacteria. Their own bodies will also have some of this carbon, but some will be sent back to air, released back to air through their own respiration process. So carbon dioxide goes back through waste and excreta. So waste also means dead bodies, excreta. Some of this carbon is released back into the air. So this is one route. Now Durga Karki has said combustion. So Durga Karki, combustion is who does the combustion? And where does combustion of what? I mean, right now, think of you having plant bodies and animal bodies. So who will do combustion and what will we combust? Who will combust? So combustion directly does happen in nature. I mean, suppose a forest catches fire. So plants and animals will burn and die. So, but let's say we will only put it here only as waste. I mean, of course, you can create another channel for this, that much of the carbon will be released if these are burnt with fire. But that's not a very prominent process in nature. So right now we will get to the other route where their bodies, which were, we talked about 3 places where they are trapped. What are the three places? Over millions and millions of years, their bodies are trapped. I mean, the carbon inside their bodies are trapped. What were the three places? We were talking about that earlier. So what was it? I mean, I showed you pictures also, no? Okay. So Santosh Vasnit is saying corals. All right. So let's first do that, show that first. So corals are animals, tiny animals, corals and shells, mollusks. So, I mean, some animals, their skeletons, external or internal skeletons are made of calcium carbonate. So we will make one channel. You will have to make it below, Purva. Won't have space. So make it a little lower. So we will show shells here. So we will show like shells and limestone. Some carbon gets trapped here. And so this is like calcium carbonate. So Apurva, you could, right, calcium carbonate. So calcium carbonate is made by animals and gets trapped as shells in limestones. This is rarely released back into the atmosphere. It can, I mean, if we heat up limestone and turn it into, I mean, if allow it to turn it into calcium oxide, then the CO2 will go back in air. It happens, but I mean, this is what the tuna industry does, the lime industry does, but that's very little. Otherwise, this is trapped. It's trapped for like good. So this is one place where trapped. But the other place, yes, Radhika Sharma said as coal and petroleum. So their bodies, plant bodies or animal bodies. So plant bodies alone generate coal. So you remember the peat bog, the peat made out of decaying trees, decaying vegetation. So basically, we are showing coal, and this is the process of fossilization happening over millions and millions of years. So that, like, a lot of coal is nothing but a lot of carbon chains. So just to show carbon chains, Apurva has used different colors, and like she's just put like these bindis to show that coal has a lot of carbon chains. And actually, for short, she has written fossils, but these are not those other fossils. This is fossil fuel. So you can call it fossil fuel, or you can say the process of fossilization leads to coal. And this fossilization is only of plant bodies. But under the sea, if you remember, we said, Geeta Sapkuta has said some amount of carbon dioxide is dissolved in seawater. Yeah, correct. We haven't shown it here, and normally it is not shown in carbon cycle. But you are right. Some carbon dioxide is actually present. Not some, quite a lot actually is present, dissolved inside seawater. So if you want, we can make a small arrow, but you'll have to, Apurva, CO2 in air. From there, a small arrow to seawater. Maybe if you have space, you can, I mean, keep it on the side.
Struggling with space a little, but...
Make a small box. Make a small box somewhere. Just a small box. So just say seawater. Yeah, actually, Apurva is right now struggling with how to show it also. Yeah, so she has put that box. Yeah, so this is seawater, and actually speaking, it should have been made below where we have shown shells, because it is this carbon dioxide which makes calcium carbonate and then shells and limestones. So if you have space on your blackboard or whiteboard, you can make it below there. But right now we have shown it here. So the other process of fossilization produces petroleum. And for petroleum, it is plants and animal bodies both undergoing this process of like decay and compaction and chemical change under seawater. Again, a process that takes millions of years. So, which generates petroleum. And once again, Apurva has shown that it is lot of carbon chains. So again, a process of fossilization, lot of different carbon chains, small or big. We saw how many carbon chains were existing inside petroleum. Lots of hydrocarbons, lots and lots of hydrocarbons. So we see all carbon trapped here in various places, and now comes burning. Somebody had already talked about combustion, but what do we burn out of all this? Humans do the burning mostly. I mean, nature didn't do this burning, but we are doing it today, and we are doing it far, far more than it happened ever in the whole history of our planet. Coal and petroleum was buried under the sea or under land, but now we are burning both of them at a very, very fast pace. Over past 100 years, 150 years, we have burned enough coal and petroleum to release a whole lot of carbon dioxide back into air. And therefore, we know that the percentage of carbon dioxide in the air is increasing steadily. And because it's a greenhouse gas, it's showing the climate change is speeding up. So we will need a separate session on climate change. Currently, other than where this carbon dioxide is coming from, we are not going to talk much about it. But this, you can say, completes our carbon cycle fully. I mean, Apurva, can you just shift a little and show the whole thing? So just you can see that all the carbon cycle, all the carbon in the world, the major places where it's trapped is visible here in air, in water, in plant bodies and animal bodies, and in shells and limestone rocks. So all that is visible. So thank you, Apurva. I think you can, I will remove this spotlight. People can ask questions on this one. And then we will show this on a slide as well. But is the whole process understood? And I would request teachers to make children do this step by step and allow them to think through this. You know, carbon cycle is shown as a very, very small cycle in the textbook, and we just teach children to memorize it. But it's one of the most vital cycles in nature, and if children understand its components, their understanding would get immensely more rich than usual. And this cycle, this and nitrogen cycle are so important. They also have biology and chemistry, both knowledge coming in. So it's very useful. If you have questions, you can ask. Otherwise, I will just revise it on the screen once. So
I'm also showing the whole cycle in one frame now. So
Achha.
In case...
Yeah, just a sec. Then let me spotlight that. So yes, great. So the whole cycle is visible here. So friends, I like exactly copying what is there in the textbook is not so important, as it's important for children to understand how and why it's happening. And as you can see, the right-hand portion, the coal and petroleum, is not simple to understand. Coal, petroleum shells, that part is not trivially simple. So it's important to make children's understanding on this a little better. So Radhika Sharma is saying, yes, we understood in simple and interesting way. Radhika, my request to take this to classrooms to children. Children should be able to appreciate this. Once they appreciate this, it will feed a lot into their understanding of ecosystems and how forests work, or how, climate change functions, or for that matter, even organic chemistry. So, yeah, thanks, Apurva. I'll show it on the...
Sure.
I will show on a slide also. This exists on a slide as well. But deliberately, we have put in pictures of so many things which children may or may not be familiar with. This is the carbon cycle, the same thing shown simply. But instead of just drawing it, we can do it step by step. I mean, allow children to think through. I was also doing it with you, asking you questions at every step. So who takes in carbon dioxide first? Where does it get trapped? Where does glucose come from? Where does protein come from? Where does fat come from? And from plants, where does it go? How does it come out again? So, so the whole thing can be turned into a series of questions. Allow children to think, support them slowly but patiently, let them reason out themselves. And once this whole thing is done, their understanding would have improved a whole lot more. So that's our request to teachers. We have shown it here once again in a slide as well. So deliberately 3 different colors have been used for fats, proteins, and carbs. 3 different colors, 3 different shapes. It doesn't matter, but I mean, but it's important to show that everything is a carbon chain. Everything in the living world is a carbon chain. So whatever Apurva was showing, same thing is here on the this slide as well. So if you have any questions, please ask. This is an old run through. So yeah, any questions? Any questions, comments, or suggestions? And friends, we are like almost through with this session, and you can see that we finished it fast because you didn't have doubts or questions, very many doubts, but children have huge number of doubts. When we do this with children, it takes much more time. They ask very many more questions, and for them, it's hard. Many things are pretty hard to understand, whatever we showed. So therefore, it's good to do this slowly and patiently with children. Even then, I mean, if you use some kind of concrete objects to represent an invisible atom or invisible entity, it helps a lot. We'll be doing the same thing for nitrogen also, where we will use some object, some block to represent nitrogen and show different compounds which nitrogen produces in the environment through the cycle. So I don't know why attendance is less today. Is there any special reason why? I mean, either something must be happening in Sikkim or some network problem, or maybe people thought that carbon cycle is too simple. So why do they need a session? That's also possible. I mean, our attendance varies as per people's perception of difficulty of a session. If we keep a hard sounding topic, then a lot many more teachers attend it. But since it's not only content that we want to clarify, we also want to clarify pedagogy and how you can techniques and questions, particularly questions. My request to you all as teachers is, please notice how many questions we ask. I mean, instead of telling, we try to elicit everything, whether it's children or teachers, we elicit. So when we elicit, for example, when I asked, where did fat come from? Where, in plants, where did protein come from? You were forced to think. So often our education system is based on tell. Pour information on children, out of which they follow very little. Instead, we have to reverse that process and make it ask, encourage to reason, which the teacher has to support. So teacher from a teller becomes an asker, questioner, inquirer, to turn children into inquirers. Teacher is a facilitator who encourages children. Firstly, the teacher has to remove all threat, all fear. And when she asks and children understand that no answer is poor, no answer is bad, then children start giving answers. So Geeta has raised a very valid point. She's saying it will hamper our classes and finally completing the syllabus in specific periods. Geeta, we have ourselves noticed, I mean, see, we have been working with children quite a lot and even teachers. So some of these methods that we are using are actually far more efficient than you imagine. My request is, they're very efficient in communication. See, it's one thing we have to see as teachers is that if we just tell and we repeat what is there written in the textbook, firstly, the teacher's role is decimated. After all, it's anyway written in the textbook. If it's written in the textbook, why is the teacher needed at all? Children can read it. They know reading, especially older children, know reading, or they can start YouTube videos here from there and the matter ends. Theoretically, they should be able to learn that way. But the fact of the matter is they do not learn that way. Just telling does not make children learn. And we all know, we get frustrated. Even very sincere teachers get very frustrated that children absorb very little. We all know this. And I know as teachers, our hearts ache that I worked so hard. I tried so hard, and still half my class does not understand. When we see pathetic answers in our exam papers or in our classrooms, so I know a sincere teacher feels sad that I tried so hard. I had told this to children, and children have still not followed. So the reason is the gap lies in communication. So if you allow children to reason, think through, if you think of your role as making children use their heads instead of becoming memorizers, instead of parroting what is written in the textbook or parroting what you say in the classroom, if we provoke their minds to think, the gain is far-reaching. Gain is far-reaching, long-term, and also in exams. I just said, if they understood this topic well, they will understand organic chemistry much better, far better. So the gain will be visible long-term. And also, if this exercise, what Apurva was doing, took hardly 20 minutes. That's not even one full class. So, I mean, if you use concrete materials and so many methods, we keep putting methods also and questions also in front of you, hoping that you will get convinced to use some of them or similar methods. We are not saying absorb it in totality. You are a free doer. You are the master of your classroom. Use what appeals to you. But we are arguing that that interactive classroom is immensely more superior than a classroom where only the teacher speaks or only the teacher's mind is used, children's mind is not used. And children's mind is often used in only guessing what answer the teacher is seeking. For example, the teacher may ask a question, what is petroleum, children? And children will say fuel. Firstly, children will start guessing. So it's a one-word answer often. It's an information-seeking answer. So children are guessing. They will say one word, they'll say second word, they'll say third word. So where does petroleum come from? This is an information-seeking question. So children will guess answers, and whichever answers fit, they give that, and the teacher says correct, and the matter ends. No real reasoning or thinking involved. That's not good use of children's minds. They contain all the potential from where yours and mine and countries and Sikkim's future will come. All that potential lies in those minds which have to be taught to think independently. That's the purpose of science classrooms. Sorry, friends, I'm getting into this, but like we do sometimes have to talk about why we do what we do. We will also talk more about it. Someday we will also keep one full session on questioning, one full session on the pedagogy or the methods we use. We'll do all that. Geeta is saying students don't answer like teachers. They answer 10 times better than teachers. Believe me, every single one of these sessions have been tried with children many times. They speak far more than what you people are speaking. Believe me, they ask such beautiful questions. You know, after carbon cycle, one bright child, I mean, okay, bright in the sense of thinking child. I mean, not the exam type of bright. From Uttarakhand, there's an Uttarakhand school with which we are working very seriously. So this child said, ma'am, you said that hydrocarbons are there in coal and in petroleum under seabed or under the earth, under land. Carbon, he said, I can still understand, but hydrogen is such a light gas. All the hydrogen should have escaped to the atmosphere. How did hydrogen get inside? This is something he said in an organic chemistry session before he had done this carbon cycle. How did hydrogen reach there? Under land, under the sea. So now can you answer that question? How did it reach there? How did it reach there? But the question is brilliant. The question is brilliant, and the child is trying to connect so many things in his head. They make interconnections, they see the reasoning, they see how the world functions, and they're such curious minds. You have to provoke them and realize how they start blossoming. Some of you are very good thinkers, I can see that. But then the point is that children should become better thinkers, not us. Geeta is saying only 10% students are able to answer, rest just stand up and waste time. Geeta, see, it's a slow process. Your class will, I mean, if you use more efficient pedagogy, better interactive pedagogy, you force children to think, slowly, the rest of the children will also open up. You are right that only some part of the class answers better, but there are so many questions which any child can answer. Or at least try answering. When I asked that, where do you see carbon? What comes to your mind? See, what comes to your mind when you hear the word carbon is a very simple question every child can answer. It doesn't require a very brilliant mind to answer that, or very thinking mind or a reasoning mind. But when you ask, why does the carbon remain after burning? It requires some more thinking. When you ask, out of these things, out of milk and orange and wood and plastic and so on, copper, what do contain carbon? It requires thinking by every child. You can give them exercises which make each of them think. Okay, Geeta is saying it may be due to 2 years online classes. You are right, Geeta. Online has interfered very seriously with our classrooms and with our communication. But believe me that this session we have done only online. With children also, only online. This whole board exercise which we showed, only online. We didn't have face-to-face available either. And this, in fact, we had to adapt. We had to adapt so many of our exercises to the online medium. And after successful run through with children, then only we offer it to teachers. And we keep refining. I'm not saying that like you can completely change your methods. I'm not even asking you to. I'm just requesting to try a little to ask more than telling. The more you ask, the more you will force children to think, but it should be questions which provoke thinking. and not memory, not memorizing. That's the crucial difference between what our education system has as of now and what we can make it into. We will get into this whole thing, interactive classrooms and questioning and this pedagogy sometime later in this series. But we are trying to demonstrate to you that this kind of teaching is better teaching, more efficient teaching. I mean, someday we can hold a children's classroom also in front of you, and you can be observers to see that children genuinely do better. They genuinely ask genuine curiosity questions, genuine questions which are not there in textbooks, which we haven't asked, which nobody has asked, which have emerged out of their own minds. And sometimes beautiful questions. In fact, sometime later we realized that we should actually make an inventory of those questions, because sometimes the questions are so good. Anything else anybody wants to say? I mean, we might seem like too idealistic to you. There is an element of idealism here. I'm not denying that, but I'm also not requesting you to follow it in totality. I'm just saying slowly our science classrooms, or for that matter, our history classrooms, our geography classrooms, our literature classrooms, all our classrooms need to change if we really want to give our children a genuine opportunity to become thinkers, real thinkers. I'm just allowing everyone to speak. So if anybody wants to say anything, please, you are most welcome. Otherwise, I'll end this session. If anyone wants to say anything. Ruth is saying we also understood clearly. Thank you, Ruth. But anything else you want to say, you can speak. Others, if you want to say, please speak and say, then we can. Friends, I just want you to appreciate that this is the objective of our existence, that we help teachers. So when you say that you have been helped in some way right now, and some way later, it actually justifies our existence. So for us, it's like we do put in a lot of hard work here, lots of hard work. But that gets justified when the testimony comes from you. So, and when you are true and honest with us, we try to be honest with our work, but you honestly tell us this will be useless. We'll accept that, but you'll have to point to defects. I mean, you try it in classroom and tell us what succeeded and what did not succeed. And what were your difficulties? You can tell us for any session. What difficulties did you face? And we'll try finding some kind of solution, right? So friends, we'll end for now, unless anyone wants to say anything else. So we got free earlier than usual, which is good. Geeta is showing me the frustration of any good teacher. Any good teacher finds this frustration that only a few students are able to answer. Most of them, same as students interact. Yeah, Geeta, there are so many factors working there. Students' background, their level of confidence, their belief in themselves. Many of them are so scared to ask. The biggest fear any individual has is of looking stupid. Children think, even adults think, I will appear stupid. If my answer is wrong, I will be labeled as ignorant or not smart. That's the biggest fear. We all suffer from it. Teachers, as well as children, as well as anybody under the sun, all humans. So that's why children do not answer easily. And that's why it's so important to wait for their answer. Wait a little, encourage. Accept all answers. Even if the answer is wrong, you accept it and say, is there any other way of looking at it? You can provoke the child a little more or encourage the child a little more. We'll talk about all this. All right. Basanti is saying it was very fruitful. Yeah, so we will wait for you to tell us later when you have some time tried it. So as usual, this will be available on YouTube. And of course, all our PPTs are available for you. Even written documents of all these sessions are available for your free usage. So thank you so much. See you next week and bye-bye.